Hi, everyone. Welcome to an episode of the Revenue Insiders. I am here today with Anders Krohn. He is from Kernel.ai, and we are going to be chatting about all things data. Very near and dear to my heart, Anders. I think you and I had a conversation, an actual, like in my day job conversation. I deal with this all the time, but everyone knows me. I'd love to give you the floor to introduce yourself.
Yeah, well, really looking forward to the conversation, Tiffany. As you mentioned, I'm Anders, and I'm the CEO and founder here at Kernel. At Kernel, everything we do is focused on what we call agentic company data. We have the privilege of working with RevOps teams at many of the fastest growing and biggest technology companies in the world, like Navan, Gong, Mistral, AlphaSense, and many others. For those of you who don't know Kernel, the easiest way to think about Kernel is to imagine, what would you do with every account record in your CRM if you had unlimited time? Whether that's solving complex duplicate issues, fixing your headcount data, building complex corporate hierarchies. Essentially, a RevOps expert can do it manually for a single record, and Kernel can do it safely at scale for an entire CRM. And behind the scenes, you should think of us as like an AI native alternative to something like a Dun & Bradstreet with ability to do a lot of customization and interesting things inside of CRM. But looking forward to diving into all of those topics in more detail.
I mean, to say that this is near and dear to my heart is like such an understatement. I have done video recordings with data.com when they were doing data.com premium to roll out hierarchies. I have spent countless hours and exorbitant amount of dollars at DocuSign trying to create like custom frameworks to solve this. I had team members that lived and breathed like trying to do data at the time. I hope, Malcolm, you're listening to this episode and have solved this problem by now. I think he worked like 14 hours a day for many weeks trying to do this for territory planning for us. And I don't know how many times, I said like, we should just like start a new company that solves all of this. Of course, I didn't do that. You did. Where did where did the idea come from? Like, where was your inspiration for going down this path?
Yeah, actually, so the original insight behind what is now Kernel came from experiencing what you experienced, but from building inside of CRM. So our very first product, like many others, was an attempt at building an AI SDR. And we basically spent the better part of like 6 months just crying inside of Salesforce. It's like,
As we
because
all do. Everyone's
yeah,
rite of passage.
what you realize is like, any attempt at like reliably using AI at scale on top of the data inside of CRM is just like, completely wasted unless the data is wrong. So it's very much like garbage in, garbage out situation. And I think what a lot of people have then since realized is that most RevOps leaders, they know they don't trust the data in their CRM, but AI doesn't know, right? So if you give ChatGPT oracle.com, it doesn't know if it's Oracle Global or Oracle Spain, but it might have a huge impact on like how you think about like all the downstream things that come from there. And so that was really the sort of like founding insight. We told our customers we want to turn the ship. And then since then it's just gotten like deeper and deeper. And you sort of realize, okay, the data is wrong. No, actually the data behind the data is wrong. And then that's where we are today.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the day when I've said to sales leaders I've supported for many years that there is no such thing as accurate data. So I need you to just get on board that the data we have is what we're using. And the less time we spend, circling the drain on this topic, the more effective your teams can just be at selling. But maybe there's a light at the end of the tunnel where that's not a true statement. So I'd love to talk like competitors. I mentioned we had a sales conversation. We're now a clay shop at the moment. That we were well down that path when you and I had our first conversation, though. How are you thinking about it differently, though, than you mentioned OpenAI, like than using a ChatGPT or using a Clay or other solution to be smarter than Dun & Bradstreet? What's the difference?
Yeah, so I think maybe if we start from like, what do most of our customers do before they work with us? And then I can talk about like how are we different.
Sure.
Most companies have some kind of company database, right? Whether that's DNB or HD Insights or some info, like a place from which they get accounts. The disadvantage of those databases is like it's the same database for everyone, which means it doesn't necessarily, to your point about DocuSign, reflect how you sell. And also it can be like quite patchy. And so what a lot of companies have done is they try to plug those gaps with AI enrichment tools, whether that's Clay or even just using the model providers themselves. But where that can go wrong is that these tools have like no notion of entities and hierarchies.
Yeah.
That's to the point from before, right? Like, they can't easily distinguish between Oracle, global Oracle, and Oracle Spain, or like a subsidiary of Oracle. And so that makes a bridge between the company database and the AI enrichment tool very hard. And that's not to say that it's impossible. It's just like most people fail at that. And then the sort of final piece of the puzzle is that we mostly work with enterprise RevOps teams. And so usually they operate at a scale where you need to be able to change the CRM at scale, and they would have some kind of mass action tool. You might be familiar with tools like, Ringlead, Traction Complete, Data Groomer. But these tools are heavily dependent on the accuracy of data that comes out of
Yeah.
whether it's Clay or DNB. And so what tends to happen is that either the problem remains unresolved, or the RevOps teams, or even the reps themselves, just spend an absolutely crazy amount of time correcting data. And so the way to think about Kernel is that we bring all of the capabilities of a company database, of AI enrichment, and of a mass action tool into one platform that allows you to do what a RevOps person would do, right? Like, if you take yourself, I'm sure that like when you think about, okay, this is an account, you open the website, you're like, okay, like it's the same account as this account, like those kinds of things we can now start to do with AI. And that's really what we do at Kernel. So we would sometimes sit alongside a Clay, but then we would usually sit like upstream, and then you could still use Clay for like contact waterfalls and
Mm.
email drafting and stuff like this.
I'm curious, you named a few tools that I'm very familiar with. I'm sure a lot of people are. What is the difference in using I'm selfishly asking for myself a little bit, the difference in using a Zoom info or something along those lines for your database and pushing that information over to a Clay? What value, can you talk to me a little bit more about the value that you're getting when you combine that within Kernel?
Yeah. So like, you mean by the fact that we have our own like entity database, essentially, is
Yeah.
that what you mean? Yeah. So there's a few advantages. One of them is in relation to corporate hierarchies. It's very, very hard to get corporate hierarchies right unless you have a structured way to think about them at scale.
Mm-hmm.
The second advantage is a accuracy and cost optimization thing. So most people who use a tool like Clay will do some kind of like waterfall, right? So they will have like multiple different providers that feed into a waterfall, and then Clay does its thing, and then you get a number. Whereas for us, there is no waterfall. Like, we are on the line. Like, if we sync headcount to our customer CRM, we are accountable for the accuracy of that headcount data. So we would never expose to our customers, for example, like a prompt to change the way we collect headcount. We might give them the ability to customize it. Maybe you care about the size of the procurement team or the size of the sales team, and we can expose some of that configuration, but the like core configuration, we would not. And I think a lot of like sort of go-to-market engineering stuff is sort of over-engineered some of the like quote unquote commodities, right? Like, at the end of the day, most companies have a pretty shared definition of headcount. They just want it to be right. And I think that's where we can tell our customers, to your point about the sales leader you mentioned before, the bar for accuracy here is if you can do it reliably on the internet, we can do it. And that's the bar you should hold us to. And that allows us to like do it more efficiently, but it also allows us, for example, we have a data feedback loop. So we have a 48-hour data accuracy SLA. If a sales leader or a rep or RevOps person report a data error, we have 48 hours to either provide a path to resolution or say you're wrong. Those kinds of things you can't really do if you don't have something that's your data asset, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really interesting. I mean, I imagine I am not the only RevOps leader that has tried to replicate that with Salesforce cases and an entire team
Right.
of people that, are spending hours doing all of that manual lookup. Is this one of those things, every sales pitch is like you turn it on and it works tomorrow and you get immediate results? What does that look like? For a lot of data, what I've found is that it's not an immediate turn it on and it works. You kind of have to backwards fit it into how your structure is in your environment.
It is not with Kernel either. I'd say our standard implementation now would be around 4 weeks. They can go longer than that as well. And we have a very structured playbook for like how we roll out Kernel. It starts with like getting the configurations right, then like running like large sample sets on the accounts, then giving you the ability to take actions like deleting accounts, merging accounts, and so on. And I think probably in contrast to something like Clay, Kernel is very much an enterprise first product.
Mm.
Like we don't allow reps to use the tool. There's a very strong customer success motion, and it takes time. I think anyone who thinks they can do enterprise implementations fast is lying. Like that's just the nature of it.
Yeah.
Like CRMs are messy, and it's our job to abstract away that complexity, and that takes time. Obviously, we do it as fast as we can, but it's not like you just do like this and then your CRM is like magically. It's relatively fast, but it's not instant.
Yeah, it's I mean data is just such the bane of everyone's existence. What are the immediate benefits? Is it territory planning that you see? Like what do you hear from your customers are those instant things that they love most once they get it up and running?
I would say territory planning is usually the first one. Like that's my like dream call is like someone shows up and they're like, hey, we used Dun and Bradstreet, we've tried Clay, we have territory is in February. That's like, that's our nirvana. It's like because territory planning is such a leveraged exercise for RevOps.
Yes.
It's basically RevOps has like for a period of time almost the ability to steer the entire P&L, like which is quite crazy when you think about it. And then when you see how people actually do it, you're like, what? Like, is that how you do it? It's like, like you open all the URLs. So yes, territory planning would usually be the first one. Then there are like advantages in terms of like having accurate data for the purpose of prioritizing accounts and really any kind of like automation or AI
Okay.
workflow. And then beyond that, like once we've worked with customers for a bit longer, I would say the two ways where it starts to show up is like sort of figuring out like what's your actually true addressable market. So like running some of these things outside of your CRM gets very interesting. And then there is I think like a bit of a like RevOps credibility point, right? In the sense that like a lot of RevOps people are quite technical, highly educated people
Yeah.
who sort of go from like Salesforce integration to the boardroom. And I think if you can swing the pendulum more towards the boardroom, that has like quite like an emotional response, I would say, like where people are like, okay, now it feels right.
You're really tapping into like the needs of your economic buyer there,
Yeah.
their own progression. You said account prioritization. I have been, as we've talked before this and even today, very much in the framework of firmographic data and the buildup there. How do you guys lean into account prioritization? Because that is the hot topic right now. I think that's how pipeline is being built is really strong prioritization.
Yeah. So we would provide, obviously the accounts have to be there in the first place, right? Like,
Yeah.
we need to know which account is it. Is it Oracle Global or is it Oracle Spain? Is it something else? And then we need to have, a solid foundation upon which you can either, whether it's like tiering or scoring or AI based, whatever it is, like, you need to have the data in your CRM, and our data would often feature as part of like the prioritization
Mm.
engine. I would say that like the one learning from me in having done that with quite a lot of companies is I think we probably like over engineered some of those things a bit early on as well. And I think a lot of RevOps teams now are like a bit more back to basics,
Yes.
like good headcount, good revenue, good HQ country, and maybe like one or two custom data points drives like an outsized proportion of most prioritization engines. And then I think actually the probably more important thing is like transparency. So we would always encourage that, like rather than just showing a score, showing a tier, show the reps how you arrived at the conclusion. And that's almost as important as the data itself.
Yeah. It's interesting. We were just having this conversation at a meeting around going back to like an A, B, C, D style prioritization because it's just getting so complicated because you can get to so many more data points these days. And I think that is very much true. That a back to basics approach works. That's interesting to think about how this could layer in. Obviously, like the accurate underlying data is a big piece of that as well. You mentioned Ring Lead earlier, too, in addition to ZoomInfo and Dun& Bradstreet and a few others. Are you connecting into the lead space as well, or how does that connect into the Ring Lead world?
We would handle We only work with company or account data, but we do have deduplication,
Mm.
deletion, association capabilities. We have the ability to enrich leads with firmographic data as well. We don't have a proprietary database of contacts. Like we don't have a proprietary database of phone numbers and emails and so on. So when I say ring lead comparison, it would only be for the mass action side of it as it relates to accounts.
Yeah, that's interesting. So thinking about it in the total landscape of tools, you still need some sort of contact database that you're
Yeah,
cleaning against, but you're
right.
starting to get away from, the hodgepodge most people probably have of firmographic data
Yeah,
elements
that's right.
and people work in the system.
Yes. So I would say like a best practice implementation of Kernel would be like we handle everything that relates to company data. You have potentially like regionalized contact data providers for phone numbers and emails, and then you have some kind of like workflow automation tool. And I think that in terms of the contact data, we did try to venture into that space at some point, but I think it's such a different game. Like
Hmm.
what we are very good at is like very large scale, like agentic workflows. That's so different from building like a database of phone numbers. Like
Yeah.
and I think a lot of is one of those things that like for RevOps seems like you should run the occasional test and then you should just choose the best provider for the best, use case, which is quite different from what we do. So now we just always tell people the primary source of errors in contact data is that it's the wrong account in the first place, and like it maps to the wrong account in the contact data provider. So we'll help you get that under control to the point where you trust your CRM. You go out, choose the best contact data provider for the right purpose, and I think that's
Yeah. That makes sense. We've been in this evolution of the AI startup world for a few years now, where we saw a lot of companies pop up that are very specific in what they do, like very micro use cases almost. And as agentic worlds have advanced, we've seen a lot of spread of those companies. I think probably your transition from one idea to the next is it sort of fits in that example. But we've seen people kind of like broaden, like companies that had, I talked to a company earlier this year that was an AI SE, and now they're dealing with everything in like the deal flow structure. They've stopped like identifying as that use case. How do you see Kernel continuing to grow? Do you get broader? Are there more things in that like enterprise agentic workflow that start to fit in or deeper in the data?
I'd say we definitely get deeper. The way I like to think about product development is that you earn the right to do the next thing. I think a lot of buyers, including myself, sometimes feel like, okay, this company is failing at its core thing. Like, don't give me
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
things. And so when it comes to this particular world around like how do we build a world where you truly trust the account data and everything that relates to it, there's a lot of depth there, right? Like anyone who's sold into APAC will know that's a bit of a different game. Anyone who's sold into the US federal government or SLED will know like, okay, those are not the same hierarchies as the Vodafone hierarchy. Like, so like capturing those kinds of nuances is really important. And that is really our foundation. And then we earn the right to do the next thing. And I think if you then zoom out and say, okay, what does that then look like, say, 10, 20 years from now? Really what we have is we have like a digital representation of the B2B economy, right? We have all the companies and then we have all of the context about those companies, their web content, their job descriptions, their LinkedIn profiles, Wikipedia pages, and so on, set up in a way where it's easy for AI to extract information. And then we have the tooling for initially like, RevOps people to use that to make sure that like, have the most efficient possible go-to-market motion. So like natural evolution for us is like one, more data, and two, more tooling. But we're very laser focused on saying enterprise RevOps teams, company data. That's the thing. And it is so hard. Like I'm not gonna lie. Like like you will admit it yourself, right? Like even something like headcount data, it sounds easy.
Yes.
Then if you put a million companies into our CRM and you're like, oh my God, like what am I looking at here?
Yeah. Well, and you have a line, and then someone's like, the line is like 200 employees goes to this team, and under they're like, well, it's 201 employees on LinkedIn. And you're like, that's not an accurate data point.
So that's, I would say, the go much deeper, and we have gone much deeper in order for us to earn the right to go broader. And that's what makes me the most proud, to be honest, is like when we have RevOps teams who come to us as part of like renewal season and they're like, here's all the other things we're buying. Like, are there any of these you're planning to like? That to me is like, okay, we're earning the right. We're earning
Yeah.
the right to like, do the next thing.
I mean, there are very few tools where RevOps is the true buyer of the tool. We are always a part of the consideration, but I have more years of experience than I want to count at this moment where I have a sales team coming to me and being like, I saw this demo and I need this tool because it's going to do X, Y, Z for me. And I'm always chasing what a salesperson says is the like new shiny object that's necessary for them outside of like Salesforce, which in an enterprise company is very much an IT led, conversation. There are very few tools where like we really are the buyer. Is it truly just RevOps teams that you're going after?
I would say more often than not, like we like to get buy-in from the like sales side or the marketing side as part of the sales process. But I would say most RevOps teams get so many data complaints, like that if they come back with a solution, a lot of, I think, like senior revenue leaders, even if they are the budget holder, will just be like, whatever it takes, just solve it. So I would say like it's often for large companies like a VP RevOps or like a VP Master Data Governance, VP Ops something is like the final buyer with like a quick check-in with the chief revenue officer or the CFO. And then there will be the odd instance where they are more involved in the sales process. But really, like we are very much built for RevOps. Like that, we would never work, for example, with a company that doesn't have a RevOps team. We have tried and regretted it. So,
Yeah, you still need that in between layer to
yeah,
be a catch-all for
yeah,
sure.
for sure.
Okay, we started the conversation and you talked about how you went from an AI SDR app to struggling with the data as everyone does in any CRM system to what you are today. What were you doing before you started the company overall that led to the AI SDR being an idea of what you were driving towards?
Yeah. So I started my first business when I was a student, selling learning platforms to universities to help them take on-campus courses and make them more engaging online, which I spent most of my 20s on. Turns out it's quite hard to sell to universities. I don't know if you've ever tried. That's pretty brutal. But learned a lot about like complex enterprise sales. And so what led originally to the after I stopped working on that company, we actually sold it. We sold it to our customers. So it's still running today. Sort of went on a bit of an exploration, like, okay, like what am I now going to dedicate my life to? And there were really like two key criteria. One is like a problem that I could somewhat relate to myself. And the second one is like something where there's like very strong market tailwinds. And my co-founder back then, he worked at Anthropic, the AI lab. And so we had some early insights into like, okay, like this thing called language models might change everything. And then started to think about, okay, what are the workflows in the enterprise that we're familiar with that will completely change in a world where computers can like digest and like write. So that was the very early innings of what is now Kernel. And then a few sort of small things, and then AI SDR, and then we got proper customers. We were like, oh my god, these CRMs, they just get worse and worse. So
Yeah.
let's fix that.
Yeah, that's the true problem to solve. Super interesting journey. I mean, I think with all things AI, whether you're a casual user or you have an enterprise chat GPT license or anywhere in between, you're always trying to solve the thing that is the most painful for you with AI. Like what can I ask chat GPT to do for me today? Meal plan for my family. I've asked chat to tell me like how to parent my daughter when she's gotten in trouble with school, like pretend to be a child psychologist. So I think it makes sense having like that sales experience and landing in like an AI SDR, that outbounding and pipeline management, I don't think is a lot of people's favorite role.
That's for sure. And I think I think now we're sort of like at the point where there's still a lot of hype, but the rubber is also hitting the road in a lot of like companies. And I think that's where RevOps people play a really crucial role, right? Because ultimately they are accountable for a lot of data in the enterprise. And AI without accurate data is like, at scale, it doesn't really make any difference, right? And so I think that's very exciting. And definitely when I speak with RevOps people now, they're not like there for curiosity reasons. They're there because they have like real problems that they want to solve.
Yeah.
And whereas like 2 years ago, it was a bit more, okay, what's going on here?
I liked what you said earlier in the call, like, especially in territory season, RevOps is really steering like a large part of the ship. And it's in a very invisible way a lot of times. Like, people, there's not a lot of RevOps in general, like people in our roles don't have a ton of visibility from the entire company outside of just keeping the lights on. Like, they're the team that needs to fix things. So I do think centering them in some of these conversations is really helpful for understanding that broader impact that all of this has, but RevOps teams in general. Okay. We are at the point in the episode where we always like to ask our guests to ask us a question so that we walk away kind of pondering something that we hadn't thought about, some homework for us to do. It can be a very spicy question, something that really challenges like the status quo or how we think, or something that's relevant to Kernel. What question do you want
Yeah,
to?
I'll ask the question I frequently ask in like discovery calls. I don't know if it's spicy, but it's like, I think the best way to think about the capabilities that AI bring to data is, what would you do if you had all the time in the world to like fix just one record? Like, I think that's the question that I like when I speak with rebels who are probably less familiar with AI, and they're like, okay, like how do you get started here? It's like, open the accounts page inside of Salesforce and just think, okay, if I had like 20 hours of manual labor to pour into this one company's account page, what would I do?
Yeah.
Those are, I think that's the power that's been unlocked. And I think if RevOps people are able to answer those questions, they will be able to create a lot of value for the sales leadership, because sales leaders don't necessarily have the same intuitions around what exactly is being unlocked. And so the power of a RevOps leader can go and say, like, I thought about this thing. I think this is possible with AI
Yeah.
now. Why don't we go and do that?
That's a fantastic question. In all the years I've thought about data, you often think about it in the macro environment of like, I want employee count data correct, and I want annual revenue data correct, and I want hierarchies and all these things. But like, what are the things that I would do to make it accurate just in a single record? That's a great way to frame it. I really like that. Thank you, Anders, for the time today. This was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it. I know we will keep talking because I have more things to solve in this arena. It's an ever evolving problem for probably more than just me. But how do people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about Kernel?
Yes. So if you want to get in touch with me personally, the best place to do that is on LinkedIn. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. So just go on LinkedIn, search for my full name, Anders Krohn. If you want to get in touch with us at Kernel or learn more about Kernel, the best place is our website, which is Kernel, Kernel.ai.
Great. You can look for links on all of our social media posts. But thank you for the time today. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you so much.